When driving a truck in South Carolina, I crossed a lot of unique railroad crossings like this one, for example, that I plan on making in my train simulator. In this video, I'll show you pictures of railroad crossings I plan on making in this train simulator, and I'll also tell you what it was like for me crossing these railroad crossings in a truck, and I'll rate them on safety from 1 to 10, 10 of course being the most safe and 1 being the least safe, based on my overall experience trying to cross them. In the end of this video, I'll show you some videos and pictures from when I was a truck driver, and I'll also show you some illustrations using this train simulator that show you some situations that I found myself in while driving on the highway that were pretty stressful, some of which were so stressful I decided I didn't want to drive trucks anymore. So stay tuned for that at the end of the video. Now for the first railroad crossing. Now, I wish I could remember where this railroad crossing is located, but sadly I don't remember the exact location. All I remember is that it's at a factory somewhere at or near or around Rochester, New York. This factory is serviced by both trucks and trains, and it has a radio-controlled locomotive, which is what this sign is warning about. It's warning truck drivers to be extremely careful when crossing these tracks because the radio-controlled locomotive does not have anybody inside it driving it, so there's no one to be able to stop the train if there's someone on the tracks, and the train won't be able to see you in any way or detect your presence. So always keep clear of the crossing, and when crossing, always check to make sure there's no train on the tracks at the time. I actually have some footage of this train in operation, and as you can see, it does not blow its horn when crossing this railroad. MTX. So yeah, anyway, I really wish I could remember where this facility was located so I could properly model it, but try as I might, I could not find it on Google Maps because I could not remember its exact location. Here are some more pictures from that facility. Here I'm backed up getting my trailer unloaded, and I see this General American Marks Company hopper car. And here's an AMD Transportation Company hopper car that's a couple to it. Now, the next railroad crossing, or rather collection of railroad crossings, are located near this large paper factory called International Paper Company. This is actually a place I went to when I was a truck driver in South Carolina. I was supposed to be picking up a load of rolled paper, but apparently this was the wrong address, so we ended up having to travel an additional 100 miles further to get to the correct location where they actually had the load that was supposed to go into the trailer. I actually plan on creating this entire facility as well as the tracks that surround it in the game if possible. It's a large facility that's serviced by both trucks and trains. Trucks deliver lumber and chemicals, and I believe they also ship out the paper via truck. Not entirely sure what the trains deliver to this factory, but they probably deliver a few of the chemicals used in the paper making process, and some of the paper is probably also shipped out by train. Now, as far as safety is concerned, I would rate these railroad crossings a 7 out of 10 because even though you can clearly see down the tracks to see if there's a train coming, you have to leave it up to your own judgment to determine how far the train is from the crossing and how fast it's going so you can know whether or not you should stop. And that's usually not a good idea because trains create an optical illusion that makes it look like they're traveling slower than they actually are. So you can't always tell how far the train is or how fast it's going. So I would think that you should at least put flashers at these crossings. I don't really like unprotected railroad crossings in general for that reason. By the way, these are called self-inflating tires. A lot of truck trailers have them these days. I like them because I don't have to physically check the tire pressure in these because it automatically pumps air into the tires when it gets low. Oh, and here's a close-up of that factory. It looks really large. Not really sure how I would model that in this game. Here's a picture of some of the railroad crossings near the factory. And here's another railroad crossing. By the way, a lot of the roads near this factory are dirt roads, so I would probably recommend having your window rolled up if another truck is passing you in the other direction, so that you won't get all dirty from the dirt that it kicks up. Here's a siding near the factory. I'm guessing this is where they store the train cars before they load or unload them. Here's another railroad crossing, which I feel sorry for anyone that has to cross this because there's a train parked across it. I'm guessing not that many people use it though. As you can see, there are a lot of railroad crossings near this factory. This is another railroad crossing I crossed on the way to the factory. It's on US Highway 521. Not really much to say about this crossing. It's just a standard one-track crossing with 2 cantilevers and 2 gate mechanisms. As far as safety is concerned, I would rate it a 10 out of 10 because it has lights, gates, and bells to protect the crossing, and they can be seen from a distance. This is another railroad crossing I crossed on the way to this factory. It's on US Highway 17. I did not like crossing this railroad crossing. To find out why, we must take a closer look at it. This railroad crossing is located very close to a traffic light intersection. So close that if that light were to turn red on you while you were crossing the railroad crossing, the trailer would end up stuck on the tracks and potentially in the path of a train. Now, I'm not sure how often this intersection receives a train, but it's still something you should be careful of when crossing this type of intersection. Now, if the light were to turn yellow on you, one of 3 things would happen. Either you would go through the yellow light and run the risk of getting a ticket for going through a yellow light, which you don't always get in trouble for that, but sometimes you can actually get a ticket for that. Or you could run the red light if you're unlucky enough that the light would turn red before you get through the intersection, then get a ticket for running a red light potentially. Or you could stop, but then your trailer would be stuck on a railroad crossing, and then you could potentially get a ticket for stopping on a railroad crossing, which is also illegal. So one of 3 things could happen depending on which choice you make, and they all have pretty bad consequences. So yeah, that's one reason I don't like this type of intersection. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably rate this one about a 2 as far as safety is concerned, because it gives you the potential of getting stuck on the tracks if the light were to turn red on you. Now, I was lucky enough that I've crossed this crossing twice, and the light was always green the whole time, and I never ended up in a situation where I had to run a yellow light to avoid getting stuck on the tracks. But I'm not sure if anyone else would be that lucky when crossing these tracks, so I don't really refer to this type of intersection as safe. There's actually another railroad crossing similar to this that I crossed that I'll show you a picture of later in the video. This railroad crossing is located in Johnsville, South Carolina. To find out why I hated crossing this one in a truck specifically, we'll have to take another close look at it. Now, I had to make a left at this intersection to get to a place where I was supposed to be picking up a load. But do you not see the problem with this intersection? Well, the first problem is the placement of the stop sign. Like, do they expect you to stop on the tracks to look both ways to see if it's safe to cross? See, here's how this intersection would be handled if it were in Pennsylvania. The other road would have the stop sign, and the road that crosses the tracks would automatically have the right-of-way which means I would not have to stop before making a left turn at this intersection. I'd just be able to go. And if there are any cars on the road, they would have to wait for me. And that's the way it should be at an intersection like this. The tracks that cross the, the road that crosses the tracks should have the right of way, so that you don't end up putting yourself in a situation where you have to stop in the path of a moving train, which is actually a very easy way to get hit by one at this type of intersection. There's another problem, specifically with making left turns at this intersection. You cannot see down the road on the left side because there are trees in the way. So yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as safety is concerned, specifically when making a left turn or a right turn on this side of the intersection, I'd give it a 0 out of 10 because you can't see down the road in one direction, and this intersection expects you to stop on the tracks before continuing, which is not safe. I mean, I don't even know how fast the trains go through here. I don't think one will be able to stop in time if they saw you. On my way back from picking up the load, I had to make a right turn at this exact same intersection. It wasn't quite as bad, obviously, because I didn't end up in a situation where I had to stop on the tracks. So in this direction, as far as safety is concerned, I'd rate it maybe a 7 out of 10. There actually was a train approaching the crossing at the time that I crossed it, and the crossing turned on a few seconds after I had gotten all the way across the tracks. Driving a truck in South Carolina, I've crossed so many railroad crossings that I lost count on just that one day. But of all the crossings that I crossed, this one on US Highway 52 in Florence, South Carolina has got to be my least favorite as far as safety is concerned. I think you already know why just by looking at it, but just in case, let's get a closer look at this intersection to see how it's set up. South Carolina must be actively trying to get people hit by a train the way they have these intersections set up. South Carolina gets really creative with its railroad crossings, as you can see by the way this is set up. I had to make a left turn at this intersection, which is challenging enough, but it's even more challenging when you have to cross a track at the same time. So, while I was making a left turn at this intersection, as soon as my front tire touched the track, the green arrow turned yellow. I ended up having to block the left 3 lanes so that the cars on the other side wouldn't try to cross while I'm trying to complete this left turn. Because had I have had to wait for them, I would have been stuck for a whole traffic light cycle with the truck on the tracks, which would have put me in harm's way. If there were a train headed for the crossing, I would have run the risk of being hit by the train. So I had to get across that intersection as soon as possible, regardless of the fact that the light was turning red. So as far as safety is concerned, at least when making a left turn at this intersection, I'll give it a 0 out of 10 because the green arrow does not stay green long enough for a truck to complete a left turn. There's actually a lot of railroad crossings like this in Florence, South Carolina, which means this town must be actively trying to get you hit by a train as much as possible, because I cannot think of any other explanation as to why you'd have so many intersections like this. Here's a sign warning truck drivers that if they try to cross this railroad crossing, their trailer could potentially get stuck on the tracks. They're recommending that you don't use this intersection. And here's another similar railroad crossing further north, similar to the one that I almost got stuck on. It looks like it has a no right turn train sign as well. Here's a picture I took of the Washington, D.C. subway while on I-95. Don't worry though, I was not driving when I took this picture, I was riding in the passenger seat. I would never try to take out my phone and take a picture while behind the wheel of a vehicle. It's not just unsafe, it's also illegal. Here are some other pictures from that highway, and in a minute I'm going to show you some footage of it as well.
.0 miles ahead, stay on I-95 north, zippers left. bears left. Stay on I-95 north as it bears left. Ahead, stay on I-95 north as it bears left. Now, stay on I-95 north as it bears left. .7 miles ahead, stay on I-95 north as it bears left. 2 miles ahead, stay on I-95 north as it bears left.